By the autumn of 1944, Germany was fighting a war it could no longer sustain. The fronts were collapsing, experienced pilots were gone, and most critically, fuel had become a luxury the Reich could not afford. Without fuel, even the most advanced aircraft were nothing more than metal monuments to ambition. The Allied strategy was brutally simple and devastatingly effective. Instead of chasing German fighters in the skies, American planners targeted the heart of the war machine itself. Synthetic fuel plants, scattered across central Germany, became priority targets. Destroy them, and the Luftwaffe would be grounded without a decisive battle. This is where desperation gave birth to innovation. The Me-163 Komet was not designed as a conventional fighter. It was a point defense weapon, created for one purpose only, to intercept high-altitude bombers with overwhelming speed. Powered by a volatile rocket engine, it could climb faster than anything in the air. In theory, it could slash through bomber formations before escorts could react. In practice, it was a gamble with death. The aircraft carried only minutes of fuel. Its propellants were so unstable that even a hard landing could be fatal. Pilots knew that every mission carried the risk of burning alive before ever seeing the enemy. Yet volunteers stepped forward, not because they believed the aircraft would win the war, but because there were no other options left. Lieutenant Günther Andreas and Oberfeldwebel Jakob Bollenrath were among them. They trained at Brandes Airfield, a place that felt more like a testing ground than a base. Every takeoff was violent. Every landing was uncertain. There was no second chance in a rocket fighter. On the morning of November 2nd, alarms shattered the routine. Radar reports confirmed what many feared. A massive Allied force was inbound. Nearly 2,000 aircraft were crossing into German airspace, their destination unmistakable. The fuel plants had been found again. Orders were clear. All available Komets were to launch. 16 pilots climbed into their cockpits, fully aware that this would be the largest Komet operation ever attempted. No one spoke of victory. As Andreas pushed the throttle forward, the rocket ignited with a violent surge. The runway vanished beneath him. The aircraft clawed upward, almost vertical, as gravity itself seemed to lose its grip. Above him waited the largest bomber formation he would ever see. Below him, the ground was already falling away. The battle had begun before anyone could fully comprehend its scale. The climb felt unreal. The Me-163 did not ease into altitude the way conventional fighters did. It surged upward, almost vertically. The rockets thrust, forcing Günther Andreas deep into his seat as the world below shrank with terrifying speed. The airspeed needle swept past numbers no fighter pilot had ever seen in combat. Then, just as suddenly as the violence began, it stopped. The engine was throttled back to conserve fuel, and Andreas leveled out into brilliant blue sky. For a brief moment, there was silence. No vibration, no propeller. Only wind rushing past the canopy. That was when he saw them. The formation stretched from horizon to horizon, an endless river of aircraft moving with mechanical discipline. Hundreds of B-17 flying fortresses flew wingtip to wingtip, their silver fuselages glinting in the sun. Around them, escort fighters weaved patiently, guardians of an airborne armada. It was a sight both awe-inspiring and horrifying. This was not a target. It was an industry in motion. The Komets scattered as planned, each pilot selecting a slice of the formation. There would be no second chances. At these speeds, a single attack run was all the aircraft allowed. Jakob Bollenrath peeled away first, tipping his nose down toward the bombers. Andreas followed moments later. He pushed the throttle forward and felt the rocket surge once again, hurling the aircraft into a steep dive. The bombers grew larger with terrifying speed. The closing rate was so extreme that it felt as if the entire formation was standing still in the sky. Andreas had only seconds. No corrections, no hesitation. He fired. Twin 30mm cannons erupted beneath the nose of the Komet, hurling heavy shells toward a fortress's wing. The recoil shuddered through the small aircraft as fragments tore from the bomber's structure. Before the gunners could fully react, Andreas was already past them, diving under the formation and vanishing from their defensive fire. It was a hit, but not a kill. Above him, bomb bay doors yawned open across the formation. Thousands of pounds of explosives tumbled earthward, destined for the fuel plants below. From his vantage point, Andreas could only watch as the strategic heart of Germany was hammered yet again. Fuel remained. Time did not. As the B-17 seconds turned for home, damaged bombers lagged behind the formation, their wounds visible even from a distance. To a hunter, they were irresistible. Andreas throttled back, gliding beneath the massive shapes overhead, positioning himself with care. This time, he would attack from below, where the bombers were most vulnerable. When he advanced the throttle to maximum, the rocket answered with brutal force. The aircraft surged forward, accelerating towards 600 miles per hour as Andreas pulled up into the bomber's underside. But the fortress was not blind. Deep within its belly, the ball turret swung to life. The duel that followed would be decided not by speed alone, but by fractions of a second and the cold arithmetic of firepower. The approach from below was the most dangerous path of all. As Günther Andreas pulled his aircraft upward beneath the bomber, the massive shape of the flying fortress filled his vision. Its underside loomed like a moving wall of metal. For a split second, speed and altitude aligned perfectly. The Komet surged into position. Then the ball turret moved. The American gunner saw the threat and reacted instantly. Twin machine guns swung downward, tracking the climbing rocket fighter with practiced precision. Andreas centered his crosshairs and fired again. Almost immediately, one of his cannons jammed. There was no time to break off. He held his course, the remaining 30mm cannon hammering shells into the bomber's belly as tracer rounds streaked past the canopy. The air around him flashed with fire. The fortress shuddered, but it did not fall. Then the bullet struck. It punched through the canopy in a violent crack. Shards of plexiglass exploded inward, tearing across Andreas's face. A searing pain bloomed above his left eye as fragments cut into his skin. The round continued through the armored plate behind him and slammed into the fuel tank. In that instant, confidence vanished. The Mi-163's fuel was infamous. Two volatile liquids that ignited on contact. Pilots feared it more than enemy fire. A single spark could turn the cockpit into a furnace. Andreas broke away, diving hard to escape the formation. Tracers followed briefly, then faded as the distance grew. He had seconds to decide. The engine was nearly dry. The aircraft might already be burning. He reached for the canopy release. Nothing happened. He pulled harder, fighting the force of the airstream, pinning it shut. The smell of heat crept into the cockpit. Somewhere behind him, flames were beginning to spread. Unseen by Andreas, a P-51 Mustang was already turning toward him. Captain Fred Glover had watched the damaged Komet break away from the bombers. He recognized the vulnerability immediately. The contrails marked the target. He rolled in behind and closed the distance. Glover opened fire. 6 .50 caliber machine guns poured bullets toward the small rocket fighter. Andreas shoved the nose down, trying to dive clear, but the throttle answered with silence. The fuel was gone. The Mustang roared past, then curved back for another pass. Panels tore away from the Comet's fuselage. Bullets ripped through the wings and punctured the fuel tanks. Vapors ignited, crawling across the aircraft's underside in sheets of flame. Still, Andreas fought on. He rolled inverted and pushed the dive steeper, hoping speed alone could buy him one last chance. The Mi-163's airframe held together as the Mustang pressed the attack, shredding what little remained intact. Then, suddenly, Glover broke away. More Komets were diving out of the clouds, and the American pilot chose survival over pursuit. Andreas was left alone with a burning aircraft and dwindling options. Across the sky, Jakob Bollenrath faced his own fate. Chased by another Mustang, his engine failed under fire. Attempts to restart it ended in silence. When the American guns found their mark, flames erupted along the fuselage. The Komet rolled uncontrollably toward the ground. There was no parachute. As Andreas finally forced his canopy open and bailed into the cold air below, he watched helplessly as Bollenrath's aircraft fell in a burning arc. Some pilots escaped the fastest aircraft ever built. Others did not. From the cockpit of a P-51 Mustang, the battle looked very different. To American escort pilots, the Mi-163 Komet was not a miracle weapon. It was a threat, yes, but a fleeting one. Fast beyond belief, deadly in the first seconds of an attack, and then suddenly powerless. The key was patience. Pilots like Captain Fred Glover and Captain Louis Norley understood energy warfare instinctively. They did not chase the rocket fighters in a climb. They waited. When the Komets exhausted their fuel and turned into gliders, the balance shifted decisively. Speed meant nothing without endurance. This was the fundamental mismatch at the heart of the Komet program. The United States did not seek to win the air war through singular technological leaps. It fought with systems. Long-range escorts protected bombers deep into enemy territory. Replacement pilots arrived continuously. Fuel flowed freely. Losses were calculated, absorbed, and replaced. Against that reality, the Me-163 was a weapon born too late and too isolated to matter strategically. Even on its most successful day, the rocket fighter could not break a formation, stop a bombing run, or alter the outcome below. Bombs still fell. Fuel plants still burned. The Allied air campaign continued, methodically stripping Germany of its ability to wage modern war. For American planners, the lesson was clear and enduring. Technological superiority mattered, but only when integrated into a broader doctrine of logistics, training, and industrial capacity. A single aircraft, no matter how advanced, could not compensate for systemic collapse. The Komet became a symbol not of German strength, but of strategic desperation. It demonstrated what innovation could achieve under pressure, and what it could not overcome. In the skies that day, American pilots did not celebrate the destruction of a rare enemy aircraft. They focused on the mission: protect the bombers, maintain formation, return home. An ocean away from Washington, the implications were already being absorbed. The war would be won not by speed alone, but by sustainability, and history would remember the difference. When the smoke finally cleared, the sky over Germany returned to its deceptive calm. The bombers were gone, the fighters were scattered, and the fastest aircraft ever to see combat had proven a painful truth. Lieutenant Günther Andreas survived the day. His parachute carried him safely to the ground, away from the burning wreckage of his Me-163. Jakob Bollenrath did not. His aircraft fell without a single white canopy following it. In the end, speed could not save everyone.